Okay, it is 8:32 p.m. Central Standard Time, and yes, it is Tuesday, July the 27th, 2021, and welcome to week number 4. I said 4. That's right, I said 4 of Introduction to Corrections. And you know what that means? It means we just have 2 more weeks after this week, but we have 1 more lecture, which is going to be in week 5. We don't have a week 6 lecture. And so tonight, as you gathered from what I shared before, but this is in case you forgot, that my wedding anniversary number 27 is tomorrow, the 28th. So I did this recording today. I indicated it on the announcements, and I announced it last week as well. So you want to make sure you check out the lecture. Again, I remind you, too many people keep getting points taken off because you're not putting citations in the body and references at the end. You got to have that. Even if it's an infogram, you still got to have a cover page. You still got to have a reference page to it. But you got to have citations. And don't just throw 1 point in there. Throw adequate number of points to elaborate on the information so that if someone that didn't understand could pick up your assignment and be able to read it. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. And here we go. All right, so this is the home page. Let's go to student preview mode for this period. And you can see this is where these are the emails that I sent you. As you know, I sent you the PowerPoints for this week already. And, you know, make sure that you do okay. And these are my emails I sent out. This is the module showing the assignments for the week. Written assignment about probation officers, intermediate sanctions, of course your quiz, and then your live classroom lecture. Of course, you see your written assignment and your quiz and your classroom phrase are due the 1st of August, which is Sunday, this Sunday. Your reply post, your reply post is due the 31st, but your initial post is due tonight, July the 27th. So as you know that. All right, so let's go over these topics, starting with the probation officer. So you have a scenario given to you about a probation officer and the hiring of probation officers, and you're going to create a job announcement for the probation officer's position and include and summarize the continuing of probation officer duties, what the duties are. Describe the 4 roles of a probation officer. There are more than 4, but at least 4. Include specific examples of what the probation officer is required to do in fulfilling the roles, such as surveillance, broker of services, liaison of the court, change agents, intervention. Be sure you provide, there it is, supporting evidence from credible sources. Again, that's citations in the body, not just a citation, but citations. And then your professional language, your spelling correctly, your paragraphs, using correct spelling and grammar, and you should be aware that it must be in a Word document. It cannot be in any other format in order to be graded. So it's very, 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 very important that you understand that. Give me 1 second here. So you want to make sure you follow those requirements. I'm going to go over the rubric in just a few minutes. You can see that it is due on the 1st. All right, so we'll come back to that in just a few. The discussion assignment, which is due tonight, the initial post on intermediate sanctions. And you're going to use this scenario here, and you're going to take it. All right, and so what you're going to do is explain the intermediate sanction to utilize for Pat's violation. Support the sanction selection, detailing why, explaining why you selected it, include any potential problems, include any potential issues. That's your initial post. In your reply post, choose a peer with a different intermediate sanction. If possible, discuss whether you believe they supported their selection, why or why not. Explain why you agree or disagree with the other student's choice, and ask them to respond. Share any potential issues that may result in their selection. Okay, so again, the initial post is due tonight, the 27th, and the reply post is due Saturday, the 31st. The quiz I will not click on because it will tell me, but you already know how your quizzes work. You have 3 possible attempts to do it within that week's period. You know that, and it grades it automatically. And then your live classroom phrase that I will give you today, that will be due at that time as well. All right. Let's go to the rubric, just to make while it's fresh in your mind about the written assignment, probation officer. Reminding you that there are 4 columns, from emerging to competence to proficiency to mastery. And you want to make sure that you are in mastery. Remember I said if you don't have credible sources, notice every section has credible source requirement, except the last part, which is the spelling and grammar. If you don't have any, you're going to automatically end up over here. I can't put you in here or here. If you put minimal supporting evidence, like maybe 1, if you put 2, you might get here. But you want to put at least 3 or more so you can explain. So remember, you got to remember what your credible sources do. They support the statements that are contained in your paper, and it gives the person, if they were reading your paper or your assignment, the ability to be able to discover where you got the information that you use to create the paper. And it's very important. You need to be in that habit, because you'll be called upon to do written assignments once you become a probation officer or whatever. So it's very important. All right. So having said that, again, let's see what happens. All right. So now let's go ahead and let's look at the course calendar. I won't go back to student for that because you can see Here's the month view, and it tells you where we are right down here. We're at the 27th, which is Tuesday, and your initial post is due, and of course your live lecture. Okay. Oops, I put that yeah, the 27th, your live lecture. So then your initial post, 27th, your reply post, the 31st. Then let's go to August. August 1st, your live classroom phrase, your quiz, and your written, as I shared with you earlier. And then you will note next week, our final lecture is Wednesday. Notice this, that a week, 2 weeks from today, the course ends. Now, all assignments from week 1 to 3, if they are not turned in by the end of this week, you will not be able to turn them in. Of course, you'll still lose points because no one has let me know about extenuating circumstances concerning the assignments, but a few people, and then I will regard them. But keep in mind that the course absolutely ends on the 10th. Do not send me a message on the 10th asking to give you more time, because I can't. There's a process, but it has to be done properly and adequately, and then I will determine whether or not it's proper or not. So it's very important for you to know that. Very, very, very important. All right, so the 10th, the course absolutely ends. Doesn't end the 11th, doesn't end 12th, 13th, 14th, or the 15th, because the actual term 2 starts the next day on the 11th. Let's take a look at the announcement. As you can see, the announcement for week 4, it says here, we deal with prisoner rights and evolution of probation. So you're going to learn about probation more. I sent you chapters 8 and 9 of the textbook PowerPoints that you utilize to help you. Dealing a little bit with the law of correction and prisoner rights, Bill of Rights and community supervision, correction law and prisoner rights activities, sentencing sanctions, vocabulary review, and the involving role of the probation officer, which I will briefly share that with you. Notice this week, the lecture I highlighted Tuesday because it's tonight. And normally that's not it, remember, because of what I told you earlier, my wedding anniversary tomorrow. Your discussion assignment, intermediate sanction, of course, is due tonight. Reply post due Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. Finally, complete the written assignment, probation officer, which I just went over with you in detail, and the quiz, which you have 3 times to complete. The highest grade will become your final grade, and that's due by this Sunday, 11:59 p.m. And then there's a survey, mid-quarter survey, if you want to take a few minutes to complete that. It's not required. And this is a reminder to continue to be strong and finish strong. And you know about my motto, adversity is the springboard to success. So all those things you're aware of. Okay, in case you're not, there is the announcement, and you can open this and it will take you to the link that you click on, and it will take you to what that is all about. It's an hour-long piece that tells you a little bit about myself. All right. Again, I remind you, if you look at the syllabus, it tells you that you can call me, text me, email me any hour of the day except the 25th hour. If you have an issue, I would recommend not emailing, but texting or calling me. If I'm not available, just leave a message. I will reply very quickly. Reminding you that you must conduct research for all papers and that the textbook is not the one that you're going to use as a sole source for your written assignments. So let's go into the topic of prisoner rights. We've already covered this, and we covered this. So we're going to go over these issues here. So prisoners' rights are determined by four parts of our law: the United States Constitution, and it sets out the framework of government, and it sets out that there are three branches of government: the executive branch, which is the President of the United States; the legislative branch, which is Congress, which consists of the House and the Senate, 435 congressional people and 100 senators; and then the judicial branch, of which the United States Supreme Court, excuse me, consisting of 9 members, is the law of the land. And the Constitution is where you would be able to find that. Each state has statutes as well as the federal government. The entire criminal code is 18 United States Code, and there are other sections for other legal rights of individuals. And interpreting the Constitution and statutes, the court looks at cases where people have appealed and issue rulings on that to formulate the law itself. And then there are regulations that are established by the institutions of the prisons, and whether it's federal or state prisons, as to how they operate. Keep in mind that these things cannot violate the Constitution. Okay. All right. So the Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And then these are a few of the cases that might fall under the various amendments. The First Amendment says that no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting free speech or abridgment of freedom of speech or the press or peacefully assemble. Pretty much in this instance, religion and sometimes the freedom of speech is involved. And you can see the years that there are cases for when the Muslim faith was recognized as a religion in 1962, censorship, this is a constitutional right to privacy, and Muslims, and it goes all the way down to 2006, where the policies that may deny magazines, newspapers in the prison system in an effort to promote security. What's that all about? You should be aware that there are things that are smuggled in newspapers and magazines, and even in some photographs. I shared with students that I had a client who was a corrections officer, and he got busted because he provided magazines, and they weren't pornographic, to an inmate. But we found out that what happened is that the magazine had been soaked in PCP and then dried and ironed out, so you couldn't tell. So when the person got the magazines, they would not read them, they would chew the pages to get high. So it's a security issue. All right. The Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, says that recordings can be made of visitors. Again, once again, this is for security. A warrantless search, the Constitution doesn't protect you the same way it did inside prison as outside, and the same with strip searches. All right. The Eighth Amendment, dealing with excessive bail or either fines or what we call cruel and unusual punishment, pretty much is what applies here. Is that deliberate indifference to serious medical needs constitutes cruel and unusual punishment and violates the Eighth Amendment. So if a person has an illness, they need to make sure that that person is treated. Conditions in confinement in the prison system are unconstitutional because of the conditions that were involved there. You'd have to read the case to determine. Double selling don't constitute cruel and unusual punishment, though some people might want that. A prison resident mistakenly shot in the leg during disturbance does not suffer cruel and unusual punishment if it was taken to maintain discipline and control in the facility. And then it goes on and it talks about two others, okay, dealing with drug tests. And so the 14th Amendment has to do with the states applying the Constitution. In 1968 in Alabama, the 14th Amendment was used to segregate white from black prisoners, and it was said as unconstitutional. Now, they can segregate individuals based on gang affiliation to control it, but not on the basis of race. A basic element of procedural due process must be present when decisions are made concerning the discipline. In other words, you have a right to a hearing, to a defense, to know what you're charged with in writing, and then adequate representation as well. Okay, except in some instances. Although the due process must be accorded, an individual has no right to counsel in a disciplinary hearing. That was a 76 case. I think that is being reviewed and changed. But the point of the matter is that the key thing is that individuals generally will have a Sixth Amendment right to counsel. The involuntary transfer of an incarcerated individual to a mental hospital will require a hearing before that and other due process rights and the availability of counsel. Okay. And these are just some of the things. They're found in your textbook as well. Okay. Bill of Rights. Just going to briefly show you this, because this is something that you can go over. The Bill of Rights. And it gives case law examples with topics starting from dealing with Griffith versus Wisconsin, 1987, in 1998. And if you take a look at this, and it tells you about the warrantless search aspect. This says that evidence from the exclusionary rule, while normally barred, can be used in parole or revocation hearings because of a lesser standard. Preponderance of evidence is used in parole violations and the hearings, not beyond a reasonable doubt. These two, Memper versus Ray, probation has a right to counsel in revocation and sentencing hearings before a deferred sentence could be imposed. And the reason for that is because you'd get more time. And that's because jeopardy would attach and you'd spend more time. Morrissey versus Brewer sets out the standard that a hearing officer determines if there's probable cause. But the parolee has a right to be notified, know the evidence, speak on their own behalf, confront witnesses, or present witnesses. All right. So you receive written notice of the charges, cross-examination, basic due process rights that came about in 1972. In 1973, the rights established in Morrissey versus Brewer apply now to probation as well as parole, as Morrissey versus Brewer came about. Okay, so Gagnon versus Scarpelli extended those same rights to probationers. Cooper versus Pate, a section 1983, which is a section of the United States Code. It says that you can bring lawsuits against correction officials, applies only to, not only to incarcerated individuals, but to those who are on probation as well as parole. And that's the end of that. Okay. Okay. Correction law and prisoner rights activities. The foundation of legal rights. This just kind of lays it out, as I already talked about these. The Constitution, statutes, case law, and regulations. I'm going to skip that because we covered that. Okay. And then there's a knowledge test that you can take. And you go through this test and it helps you, select the correct answer and then click it. Which of the following legal foundations is false? Which of these is false? Okay. U.S. Constitution, supreme law of the land, including the three branches, regulations made by federal, state, and local administrative agencies, case law passed by the legislature. Should know that one. And the reason why that is, case law is not. Case law passed by the legislature and case law passed by the legislature at all levels, federal, state, and local. Okay. And then you go to the next one. All right. Let me make sure that you get that one clear. I'll show you what's wrong with it, because somebody might say, what's wrong with it? The knowledge check. It says, which of the following is false? Case law passed by the legislature. Case law is not passed by the legislature. Case law is interpreted by the courts. Okay? That's why that is the one that is not correct. All right. Okay, so sentencing and the sanction. So there are various levels of sentencing, all the way from fines to boot camp. And intermediate sanctions are the least restrictive requirements and add the increased degree of control to the client's behavior. Some clients on probation are required to report quarterly or less, while others have to be in contact several times a week. And so you may be moved up and down on this continuum based upon the results of compliance or non-compliance of the orders that are issued. So when a person is sentenced to probation, there are conditions that are given, such as maybe the person might have to pay a fine, might have to attend drug and alcohol treatment, and things of that nature. So the probationer would no longer have the option of community supervision and has to serve the remainder of their sentence in jail if they violate these conditions. So you can go through and you can see, starting with fines, community service work, drug, alcohol treatment, day reporting, drug controls, home confinement, shock treatment, and boot camp. And each of these are covered here. Notice that in where you pay a fine, um, or you work for an organization to benefit the community, and it teaches you a lesson. Drug and alcohol treatment, along with educational programs. They could be outpatient or inpatient depending upon the situation. You could have to deal with day reporting facilities where many individuals that include employment or drug alcohol treatment have to report on a daily basis or a weekly basis, or when however number of times. Um, Use of chemicals such as alcohol, drugs, um, are sometimes used to control individuals. Very rarely do we do Depro Vera. Um, uh, you're dealing with individuals who are sex offenders, psychotic disorders. If you have those, they give you certain drugs as well. Home confinement is a common one. Everybody's familiar with that. And the GPS is used to determine if you left home, if you're serving your time that way. Shock treatment. Now, it doesn't mean what you think it is. Where a person is sentenced to jail, but after 30 or 90 days, the judge reduces the sentence, um, and the person learns that jail is so distasteful that they decide they're going to change their way in life. Then finally, boot camp. It's like a military type thing to put you in a regiment where you do the same thing as if you were in the military itself. You deal with workouts, marches, drill, hard labor. You are up early in the morning. And so these sanctions are used when you're dealing with probationers, and missing these requirements can end up sending you uh, to jail. Okay, and you can just see how they go across. Okay, all right. So there's many avenues open. One of the things that probation officers don't want to do is lock people up. They want people to be able to spend time outside of prison, outside of jail. Probation officers, you should be aware of, you're sentenced to that when you are given a chance to finish your sentence without going to the lockup. However, if you violate those terms, then you find yourself in a situation where you could spend the rest of your time in jail. They use intermediate sanctions that we talked about earlier to try to keep you from going to prison or jail, spending time. And it overcrowds them if too many people violate. And so the key thing is to get you pointed towards rehabilitation so that you'll go. Now, the probation officer is an evolving position. One of the first things I do want you to be aware of is that you cannot become a probation officer without a bachelor's degree. You cannot do it with an associate degree in any jurisdiction that I know of. But the probation officer started out as something very small and worked its way up to a high level position where you're going to see the continuum as I go through this pretty fast. So the roles of probation officers. So today, the community belief that the probation officer is much like that of a police is true, and protect the public and include supervision and surveillance. However, one of the key factors here is restorative uh, justice philosophies. That is to begin to prepare you so you can return to the community. Evidence-based practices have drastically changed the definition of probation and parole agent work. You'll see that as we move forward. So here's the timeline over 30 years. Over 30 years, the roles have changed. Just roughly from 1980, these were the duties. And you'll notice that you had deal with the client contacts, pre-sentence investigations. This was before a person received probation, uh, report violations, um, help individuals to move from one jurisdiction to another, and then to determine how a person is operating in prison, and then prepare a report to see how they would operate, then to appear in court. In 1996, it added into it these things. They had to do reports, evaluate bail, fine, um, program monitoring, dealing with community service work referrals. So you begin to move more toward a counselor. In addition to the two things I've said already, these are added, and you begin to see that you're dealing with trying to counsel individuals more, helping individuals to prepare for a new life, a new direction in life, all the way to today. And you see the things that are involved here: case planning, quality assurance, research outcomes. So you have to understand the research. The agency has established outcomes and analysis that deals with working with the inmates themselves. So you can see that it is a more complicated role than it was in 1980. That is why more education is required. The role of probation officer is often referred to as what we call a change agent. So with the probation or probation office, parole officer is not only responsible for the public safety through surveillance and supervision, but working individually with the offenders to help them gain skills and deal with the change in their critical minds, criminal minds, should I say, so that they can move in new directions. You've heard me talk about moving from 12 to 6 o'clock, to get them to 6 o'clock. That's the key right there. So when it says change agent, it's referring to changing the approach in life that you have to existing from crime to lawfulness. And, and that's it. So now let's take a look at your review. You can see here, this is a test that you can take, and I'm just going to show you just how it works. Read the question, select the answer, then click submit. A judicial policy of non-interference concerning the internal administration process. That's incorrect. The answer is case law. Why did you pick that one? Because of the fact that people thought it because it's hands off. But no, let's go back. I want to go back and I want to show you why it's not. Because I know almost everybody who does this. So, a judicial policy. What's a judicial policy? They deal with cases. And that's what the answer to that is. Got to read the whole thing. The constitutional guarantee that no agent or instrumentality of the government will use any procedure other than those procedures described by law to a what? Is this it? Let's see. That's it. Procedural due process, the right to a hearing, and so forth. So you go over all of these and study these, and they prepare you. And I recommend that you study these before you take the quiz. And that's it for today. And if you have any questions about the assignment, you know what to do. Reach out to me. And so I'm going to give you a phrase. And if you know me, you probably could figure it out. But the topic of today is probation officer. Give me probation officer, and you get your points for this week. All right, I'll see you next week. This next week will be back on Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. I mean at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard, and it will be our final lecture. I will cover the topics of week 5 and week 6. Okay, so you have a good week, and I will see you then. Take care.